Chapter 21. When they were at her house later, Blaine waited until he heard her come down the stairs to check on them for the last time. She always did that, and he liked it more than he would ever tell anyone. At the couch, she pulled the blanket up over Dylan, stopped for a moment, and then turned to check on him. "Hey," he said, so no one other than her could hear. "Hey." Her smile flitted over his heart. She stepped closer to him. "Shouldn't you be sleeping?" "Shouldn't you?" He reached out for her hand, and she accepted the invitation. Carefully, she sat down next to him. It was these times, when it was just the two of them, that Blaine looked forward to the most. He sat back against the footrest of the recliner and pulled her back next to him. No, girlfriend didn't do this justice. A breath to settle the words. "Jeff told me about today." "The mouse?" she laughed. "It wasn't as bad as he—" "The gun." The words stopped her, and her head fell forward slightly. "It wasn't mine," he said, as if she might think it was. "I didn't even know it was there. Gabe said by the setup, he thought she had probably started dealing, too. They think maybe it was a deal gone bad that night." Melody sat, simply nodding. "I don't know." His embrace tightened around her. "All I know is I'm so glad Dylan wasn't there, and he wasn't there because of you." She laid her head back, arching it over his shoulder so she could look at him. "Because of us." A moment, and he nodded. "Because of us." He heaved a sigh. "I'm sorry my life is such a train wreck." "None of us are perfect." "But it could be so much better." "And it could be so much worse." She turned then to face him. "Don't you get it? I'm smart enough to know that stuff isn't you. Come on, give me a little credit." "I know. I just wish I could be the person you deserve. I hate dragging you through all of this." "Hey." Her finger came under his chin and picked his gaze up to look at her. "This isn't about impressing somebody. It's life. You've got your mice in your cabinets, and I've got mine." She dropped his chin. "I think the important thing is we're being honest about them now. Don't discount that. This whole mess of a situation has forced us to stand together as a team. That's a good thing." His gaze went to her of its own accord. "I still think you're crazy for wanting to team up with me." "And you're not crazy for teaming with me?" She laughed. "Face it, we're both crazy. And it's okay. We're going to get through this, together." He nodded and pulled her back to him. Together. By Saturday morning, the fact that Blaine was still standing was more than Melody could fathom. The truth was, she was a centimeter from an utter breakdown from the strain, and edging closer to it every second. So when he suggested that she sleep in a little and then take Dylan to Eve's, she gladly relented. He, of course, was up with the sun. He only had a few last-minute straggly things to finish up at the house, and then he was meeting AJ to set up things at the new apartment, which had by some miracle come open earlier than he had thought. Melody considered it a miracle anyway. Then again, she considered a lot of things miracles these days. She glanced into the other seat and smiled as she and Dylan headed north. Dylan was quite a trooper. "So, are you excited about seeing the new place with your bed and everything all set up?" "Yeah," he said, but it was soft and not very convincing. Concern wafted over her. "What's wrong?" His little gaze came over to her. "Do bad people live there, in the apartment?" "Bad people?" She wasn't following, but she was concerned. "Yeah," he said again quietly. "Mom said Dave lived in an apartment, but I couldn't go there with her because bad people lived there." Melody's heart slid into her shoes. "Oh, honey." She reached over and gave him a hug. "This isn't that kind of apartment. It's really going to be nice. Really, you'll see." He considered that a minute, and then two. "Blaine said the school's so close I can walk there." His gaze came to hers again. "I don't want to walk there. What if there are bad guys on the way to school?" That he had lived so long with the bad guys right outside and even inside his house and never gotten this scared was a testament to someone. Who, she wasn't quite sure. Well, Blaine's going to take you to school every morning, and I'm going to come pick you up every afternoon. His eyes widened. You will? Every day? Are you kidding me? I have to have my Dylan time. You know that. What would I do without this face? She reached over and pinched his face between her thumb and finger. Look at this face. Dylan laughed as he pawed at her hand. Stop that. She glanced at him, liking his laugh. It's going to be okay. You'll see. One last walk-through, one last look at a life he was glad to be leaving far behind him. Blaine walked slowly, imprinting the memory on his heart for future reference. If he ever got the crazy thought of leaving Melody, he vowed to remember this moment. When he got to the living room, devoid of furniture and of life, he stopped. So many fights, so many nights, so many horrible memories, all leading to this moment. Mom, you'll never know how much I loved you, he whispered to the space around him. I forgive you. I do. I know you were as lost as I was. But just so you know, I've made some really, really good friends. They're teaching me about real love, the verb kind. That's what I'm using now, the verb kind, the kind that loves you anyway. I know you're okay now, and I want you to know that we are too. He looked once more around the room, dragged in a breath, and let it go. Bye, Mom. I love you. Well, look who we have here, Eve said, meeting them at the door and hugging Dylan on his way into her house. Buster's out back. Dylan raced to the kitchen. Did you give him his bone yet? Nope, I was waiting for you. Cool. He waited for the bone she took out of the cabinet and then raced outside. Melody's heart went with him. He's such a great kid, Eve said, replacing the box. Yeah, he is. She was about to say the words to make a graceful exit when Eve stepped over to the stove. Do you have a minute? Eve asked, and Melody's fear shields flew up. Yeah, I guess so. Eve glanced at her as she picked up the little white kettle. You want some tea? It's mango something or other. How could she say no? Sure. Carefully, Melody sat down at the table and waited for Eve, who brought the 2 steaming cups over to her. She set one in front of Melody, who mumbled her thanks. When Eve sat down but didn't say anything right away, Melody seriously questioned her own sanity. Why hadn't she gotten out when she had the chance? I was just wondering how you think Blaine is doing with all of this. I mean, I've talked to him at work and everything, but I know he's really good at putting up a good front when things get rough. She took a sip of her tea. Melody considered the question. Amazingly well, I think. I'd be under the bus having to deal with everything he is. Eve nodded. And you? A knife went through her heart at the kindness of this woman, whom she had been nothing but rude to for reasons she now didn't even fully understand herself. I'm just trying to be there for him, for them. It's hard sometimes. Setting the cup on the table, Eve looked at her a long minute. I heard about the gun, Lisa told me. Melody now knew how Blaine felt. It wasn't his. I know. Eve's gaze felt like it went right through her. I also know how tough something like that is to find out. It had to be a shock. Shock? Yeah, there was a good word for it. She'd gotten pretty used to being in shock script the past couple of weeks. It's all been pretty intense. I try not to think about it too much so I can do what needs to be done. I try not to think too much about what living there had to have done to Blaine and to Dylan. The tears welled in her heart. He told me on the way over here, he's scared to move into the apartment because his mom told him he couldn't go with her to the apartment she was going to because bad guys live there. Eve sighed and shook her head. Poor kid. Yeah, and I don't know how many other bad guys are living in his head either. Slowly, Eve nodded. Been there. Then she laughed. Heck, I'm still there. Confusion twined through Melody. What do you mean? Time slid into itself as Eve sat there staring at her cup. When Dustin was alive, there was a time I wanted to know all about the bad guys living in his head. The fires, the lives he was out there saving, the lives he had lost. He wouldn't tell me. She glanced up. Fireman's code and everything. It was hard. Then, about the time I got my heart wrapped around that one, he got killed. I lived with some really bad guys in my head myself for quite a while, and then AJ showed up. At first I was really glad he wasn't a fireman. At least he wouldn't be running into burning buildings that might fall on him at any moment. But what I didn't bargain on were the bad guys living in his head, the lives he couldn't pull back from the edge, the times when he had to face unfaceable situations. She shook her head as her gaze stayed on her cup. Some of them really get to him. Her glance up was only that. Like last week. I'm not sure he's still recovered from realizing it was Blaine's mom in that house. She sniffed. And I'm not sure he ever will. There was the barest of pauses. AJ's like that. He cares so much, and he doesn't want anyone to be in pain, especially people he really cares about. Eve smiled at her. But you already know that. If she didn't know before, Melody certainly did now. Somehow she had never put the phone call together with how he knew Blaine needed her that night. So, AJ was there? Eve nodded slowly. Yeah, I think that's why he didn't make it to help the last couple of days. I don't think he could face walking into that house again. Compassion for her best friend gripped her heart. She looked at Eve, understanding far more than she ever had. Thanks for telling me. Again, Eve nodded. I just thought you should know. The silver SUV was already parked in the lot in front of the new apartment. Although he was glad for the help, Blaine really had to question why God had sent this particular help. Yes, they seemed to be on near-speaking terms these days, but they were uneasy near-speaking terms, at best. Steeling his nerves, he parked the green Toyota and climbed out. It was like facing Goliath head-on. He'd barely retrieved the last of his possessions from the car when he heard the door slam and the footsteps behind him. Need some help? AJ asked, striding up, backwards cap and North Carolina basketball jersey as usual. He almost looked happy to be there. Almost. The cord of the lamp Blaine was holding didn't exactly come out of the car with him. Well, if I could get this stuff out without breaking something, that would be a start. Here. AJ reached in and unsnagged the cord. See, there you go. He wound the cord around the lamp, reached in, and grabbed the box of cleaning supplies. I can get that little box if you'll hand it to me, Blaine said, pointing at the one on the far side, and then we'll only have one more trip. AJ set the first box on the trunk, grabbed the second and handed it to Blaine, then retook the first one. Lead on. Blaine shut and locked the car, still mortified that AJ had actually seen it. But he couldn't dwell on that now. There were far more pressing issues, like how to come up with a way to not completely obliterate his chances with Melody for the next hour or so until she got here. He climbed the steps, willing his feet forward, went to the door, and unlocked it. On the other side, however, somehow he didn't at all remember them leaving this big of a mess when they left the night before. Wow, nice place, AJ said, and he almost sounded sincere as he put his box down with the rest of them. Setting the box and the lamp he was carrying down, Blaine turned and surveyed his new life. It looked like the mountain of boxes had just thrown up all over his new living quarters. The boxes were everywhere. He put his hand up to his head, staring at the mess. So, AJ said, where do you want to start? Running his fingers through his hair, Blaine looked at the fork in the road ahead of him and chose the road that was getting easier and easier. Would you believe I have no idea? He looked at AJ sheepishly and laughed. The guys packed everything up. Melody decided what to send here and what to send to her mom's place, so I really have no idea what any of this is. His hand dropped back to his side. AJ nodded his understanding of the situation, looked at the project, and made some quick calculations. Well, it won't do me any good to open boxes. I won't have a clue where anything goes. So, why don't I carry and do you direct? We'll see how that works. It was as good a plan as any. They got to work. At first it was with minimal words. Bathroom, kitchen, closet. But as the job continued, they both became more at ease with their respective roles. "This is a closet," Blaine said, handing it over to AJ, who took it and headed that direction. Blaine opened another box. "Man, I would never have gotten this done on my own. You know that?" He stood and handed the box to AJ. Bathroom. Ripping the tape off the next one, he peered inside. "I'm telling you, those two are unbelievable. They should go into the moving business." He handed him the box. Bathroom closet. "Let me tell you, if you want two great guys on your team, those are the two to have," AJ said. "I don't honestly know which one I respect more." "I hear you there. Closet." He ripped into another box. "That gun thing would have totally freaked me out, not to even mention if I'd had Mel there. But she said they just handled it. No questions asked." The box changed hands. Kitchen. AJ headed that direction. "So you really didn't know she had it then?" "I had no idea. I about passed out when they told me." He picked up another box, and they had finally uncovered one wall. Bathroom. "I owe them more than I will ever be able to repay, that's for sure." He handed another box over. Kitchen. "So, how's Mel holding up through all of this?" "She's been a rock. I tell you what, she is really something special." Blaine handed 2 boxes over. Bathroom closet. And he was at the end of those boxes as well. Amazingly, the job was starting to look more and more manageable all the time. Kitchen. AJ took the box as Blaine ripped into the next one. "Oh, wait, this is kitchen too." Without question, AJ turned and Blaine put this box on top of the first. "So, how's she doing with the other thing?" AJ asked. "The eating?" "Yeah." AJ put those boxes on the kitchen cabinet and was back in mere moments. "Better. She's really trying to eat healthy now, you know? Not overeat, but not starve either. I think she sees what she was doing to herself, which is great." The next box came in an arc from the floor to AJ via Blaine. Closet. "It's weird, you know. I never saw myself with someone like her. She's so down to earth and just real. And it's so cool because I can be real with her, too. Just me. I've never had that before." Another box got transferred. Bathroom. "So you're really serious about this, then?" Suddenly, Blaine remembered who he was talking to. Well..." He stood and scratched his ear, looking at the remaining boxes. There were so few left. Where did all the others go? "Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine my life without her anymore, you know? She's just..." Words failed. He picked up a box. Closet. Thinking through the statement, he could find no words. "I'd never really thought about marriage. Not for me, you know? But then Melody showed up, and it's nothing like I thought it would be, but somehow it's better. And now?" He handed AJ the second-to-last box. "I don't know." Instead of turning with the box, AJ stopped. "For what it's worth, I'm glad she found somebody like you." Blaine snorted and picked up the last box. "What? A rich, spoiled jerk who wasn't rich, but just a spoiled jerk?" For the second time in 2 weeks, he stood toe-to-toe with AJ Knight. However, whatever he'd expected each time hadn't been there either one. "I'm sorry about how I treated you before," AJ said, only barely looking at him. "I judged you without really knowing anything." Shrugging, Blaine started to step past his former nemesis. "It's not like I didn't give you every reason to hate me. And it's not like I gave you any reason to not totally blow me off either." AJ took a long breath. "We were both wrong, but for Mel's sake, I want you to know I think you're the best thing that ever happened to her. And when the two of you stand up at that altar someday, I'll be in the front row, cheering you both on." It wasn't manly to let AJ see the emotion, so Blaine ducked his head. After a moment, to absorb it, he nodded. "I appreciate that." He looked up. "More than you know." AJ's grin spread across his face. "What do you say we get this new place set up?" Blaine nodded. "You got it." When Melody walked in, she thought she must have the wrong apartment. "Go long," Blaine called from the back hallway. A flash of something streaked through the opening. "And touchdown!" AJ hollered, doing a happy dance right out into the main room. However, the happy dance stopped cold the second he saw Melody. "Oh, hi, Mel. I didn't hear you come in." "Yeah." Her eyebrows lifted and she glanced down the hall. "I noticed. What's going on?" "The movers," AJ said, shaking his head. "We're trying to figure out a method to their madness." Melody lifted her chin, still baffled. "Uh-huh." Before she got the next question out, Blaine strode in. Without so much as a hesitation, he stepped right up to her. "Hey, Mel, I thought that sounded like my good luck charm." With a smile the size of the Grand Canyon, he swept her into his arms and kissed her soundly. When she got to come back up for air, Melody looked from one of them to the other. "Have you two been sniffing paint, or what?" "No," AJ said, stepping over to her. Blaine let her go, and AJ wrapped her in his arms. "We're just glad to see you. Is that a crime?" She hugged him, trying to catch back onto reality. "Well, no." "Good." AJ pulled back from her. "'Cause I'd have to serve some serious time. Did you get Dylan to our place?" Man, this felt weird, bizarre, unworldly. Kind of like falling into the Twilight Zone or the fourth dimension. "Yeah, I did." Then she remembered what Eve had told her, and the strangeness melted away. She looked right at AJ. "Oh, I never told you thanks for calling me the other night." His gaze fell from hers to his shoes. "Ah, it was no big deal." "Yeah, it was." She looked back at Blaine. "And we both really appreciate it." When AJ looked at her, the goofiness was gone. Instead of words, he simply nodded. She hugged him again, only this time she felt it like she never had before. Then she stepped back against Blaine, swiped at her eyes, and looked around the space. "So, what are we standing around for? Let's get to work." The next day, the five of them once again sat in the pew. Melody next to Blaine, his arm around her. Eve sat holding hands with AJ and Dylan between the two couples. How it could all feel so right, Melody had no clue. But it did, and for that she would forever be thankful. The preacher stepped to the podium. "We all know about the miracles of Jesus, curing the blind man, making lepers whole, lifting the cripple from the mat his friends dropped from the ceiling. We've heard these stories. But there is an element that we often miss, an element that is central to the healing power of Jesus. In every one of these stories, it was the touch of Jesus that changed things. It was Jesus taking the time to touch the broken, to see the blind man that nobody had seen begging for years, to stop, to notice, to help, to love, to touch another person, and, by touching them, to heal them. He healed their bodies, yes, but his touch healed so much more, their spirits and their lives. The touch of Jesus, it was a touch of great tenderness and hope and joy. It said to the person, "I see you. You are special to me. I love you." When Jesus touched people, they knew it because they were changed by it. Many ran into town proclaiming this man who had touched them, witnessing to his power. Look at the stories. Over and over again, Jesus touches someone, and their lives are never the same. The preacher paused, shifting at the podium. Does Jesus still touch people today? When the preacher paused again, Melody let her hand drift across to Blaine's knee where his hand came over to cover hers. She looked up at him, and amazement was shining from his face. "It depends," the preacher said slowly. It depends on the decisions you and I make every day. When we stop to offer a word of encouragement or hope, that's Jesus reaching out through us to a broken, blind, hurting soul. And that touch can still work miracles. It can still lift the lost lamb from the bramble and set it on the Savior's shoulders. It can still find the lost coin and call the neighbors to come and celebrate. It can be there, running toward the sinner who believed he was lost forever, welcoming him home with loving arms and a long embrace. We all have that chance. We all have that commission. That is ultimately our call. To be Christ to each other, to reach out and touch others with the tenderness of Jesus, to love them right where they are without judgment or condemnation, but with love that is patient and kind, overflowing and abundant. The verb kind, Blaine whispered, as if he were a zombie in a trance. Melody glanced at him, but he didn't even seem to notice. Breathing through the tears, she returned her attention to the podium. The beauty of the touch of Jesus is that when it comes into our lives, we can't help but extend it to others. We want others, everyone we come into contact with, to share in this great mystery we have found. This mystery that changes ordinary water into the finest of wines, the best wine. That's what the touch of Jesus can do in a life. When our touch lifts someone else's burden and brings a light of hope back into their lives, then we are truly living our Christian calling. We are truly bringing His light and His life into this world. Imagine a world full of the gentle touch of Jesus. Imagine the lives that would be saved, the brokenness that might be healed, the unleashing of hope and love that would occur. The blind would truly see again, the lame would rise up off their mats and walk free forever. That is our legacy. That is our challenge. That is our commission, if we so choose. But it all starts with a choice, and that choice ultimately is yours. It was as if a bomb had exploded in his being. As Blaine led the others out, Melody barely got out of the bench before he wrapped her into his arms and kissed her head. They walked out to the parking lot, just holding each other. On the back steps, they stopped as first Dylan came up, and then Eve and AJ walking hand in hand. "Jeff invited us," AJ said, "but I think we'll just stop and pick something up. A couple buckets of chicken or something. Lisa's not feeling all that great." "Oh," Melody said, still wrapped in Blaine's arm. "Maybe we should just let y'all go then." "Are you kidding?" AJ asked. "We'd probably be beheaded if we showed up without you three." "Come on," Eve said. "Once that baby gets here, who knows how many more times we'll even get to do this." Blaine simply looked to Melody. He was so happy it really didn't matter what they did. "Well, maybe we can come for a little while, but we can't stay. Studious here has a test tomorrow." "Studious? Or Stud-ious?" Blaine's grin teased her unmercifully, and it worked beautifully. Her cheeks reddened nicely as her jaw dropped. "What? You were the one that said it." He pulled her even tighter to him. "I want to go with AJ, Dylan said. "And Eve," Eve said as if she was hurt. "And Eve," Dylan said, smiling sweetly. "Much better," she said, pulling him over to her for a hug. She tousled his hair. "What do you say we let you pick out the dessert?" "What?" Blaine asked in a mock pout. "No cheesecake?" "Do you think I'm a factory or what?" Eve asked. "You only get cheesecake on really special occasions." "Ah," Blaine responded as if he totally understood, which he didn't, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered to his heart today. It was flying, and there was no reason to land now. "Okay, but you be good, Dylan. You listen to AJ." "And Eve," Eve said. Blaine laughed. "And Eve." Feeling like her feet never so much as touched the pavement, Melody drifted with Blaine over to the little white car. She couldn't remember ever being so happy. At the car, they got in, and he started it up. "Does this ever seem completely unbelievable to you?" Blaine asked, glancing at her. "What?" "I don't know. Everything. I mean, how did I go from barely scraping by, trying to do everything myself, and miserably failing, to feeling like I've got the best friends in the world, the girl of my dreams, and God's love to boot? How in the world did that happen?" She smiled over at him. "I don't know, but aren't you glad it did?" "Are you kidding? Truer words have never been spoken." He started out of the lot and headed into traffic. "I don't know about you, but I love coming to church here. I used to think church was a boring waste of time. I can't figure out how I had that so wrong before." "I thought you were nuts the first time you said it. Did I want to go to church? Why would I want to go to church? But now, going, I just feel like Jesus is so speaking right to me. It's like I just want more and more and more. I want to know more about him, to learn, to hear again and again how much he loves me. I can't explain why that makes such a difference, but it so does." Blaine drove for several minutes, then he looked over at her. "You ever think about what would have happened if we didn't keep running into each other? If I hadn't called you to go with me because I wanted to get back at AJ? "Yeah." She put her head back and thought about how very far they had come. "Sometimes, but I so see now that God had a plan even in all the madness." "It makes me want to trust him all the more now." "Yeah, it does me too." He glanced at her again. "Do you think it gets any better than this?" "I wouldn't know how." Then she looked over at him. "But, good or bad, I want it to be with you." If he could have asked her at that moment, Blaine would have. His heart was there, his head was there, but his life wasn't quite. However, as he reached over, took her hand, and kissed it gently, he swore one day soon they would be together, not just as boyfriend and girlfriend, but as man and wife. For as scary as that had always felt before, the fear felt far more like excitement now. He could do nothing less than marvel as they shared their hearts with each other all the way to Jeff and Lisa's. When they arrived, it was hard to fathom just how right this felt. These weren't her friends. They were his, too. They had shown him in so many ways the touch of Jesus and the miracles that can happen when you dare to be for real with people. When they stepped up to the door, Blaine reached out and rang the doorbell. Then he pulled her to him and kissed her head. She snuggled closer into his arms, hers wrapped tightly around him. It was just one more perfect moment to add to all the others. Then the door popped open, and love once again welcomed them into its embrace. This has been For Real, Book 3, The Courage Series, written by Staci Stallings, narrated by Becky Dowdy. Copyright 2012 by Staci Stallings. Production copyright 2014 by Staci Stallings.
Like and subscribe to the Staci Stallings YouTube channel so you never miss a second of the story.